What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 283, and I just want to start off by saying we're sorry. We're sorry that we missed a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I know I can speak for myself, Steve, and then who am I here with again? Remind everybody for the
Ron.
And you guys are gonna have to help me out with this.
You know it.
I haven't done this since last year.
It rhymes with the other one.
It's me, John, folks. That was a
yeah, that's him. We missed a couple weeks, and I know we all kind of hated that happened, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Holidays happened, life happened, some crazy stuff's happening.
I think if we had thought we might take a month off, we would have embraced that, and we would have said in our last episode,
definitely.
"Hey, folks, we're about to take a little break." I think the holidays were just about to hit us, and then when that got away from us, it was like it was so easy for it to coast. So yes, here we are. Mm-hmm. We're safely, almost at the time of this recording, safely in the new year, in the new era.
Yes,
and we're committed to content, and we are promising you that we will have content. You will love it.
That is a factual statement. We will have content.
There will be content.
There will be content. We will figure out how much, how often.
Do you think we can get Daniel Day-Lewis to do a cameo where he says that?
Probably. I wonder what that one cameo would cost just for that one line.
I was about to say, what if Daniel Day-Lewis was one of the guys who's like $75 flat rate? I'll do whatever.
Yeah, he might be. I like
know.
But then it's like you find out he's gone off to Tuscany or he's gone off to the Ukraine or someplace to like live for a few years to like get in character for a cameo that he's about to do.
Yeah, like he became a podcaster to be able to read. We will have content.
He learned about bookbinding and cobbling and
How do you feel about non-athletes and non-musicians just being like, I'm retired, I'm done, I'm done with this? Wouldn't you just like pick it up after like 2 years? You're like, man, this they're not going to release anything else at this point, are they?
Right.
He's like, I'm retiring, I'm done with acting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fluid. Like half people that say that end up not doing that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that they're held to it. They're not held to it like you said, like musicians and athletes seem to be.
Oops, did we just lose Steve?
I think we did.
Uh-oh. What do we do now?
I don't know.
Was this planned? Do you think he ghosted us?
Yeah.
What?
There he is.
I don't know what just happened, but the whole Zoom just crashed.
Are you still recording?
I kept recording this whole time. Yeah, I just kept.
Yeah,
I just got quiet so you could cut it out.
You missed some great material.
I'm sure I did. The content was there. I have no doubt.
Yes,
absolutely.
So was there anything else to say about Cameo, or should we get on to maybe a couple movies that we didn't get to talk about when they came out? That it seems like the world.
I just want to ask: Am I already late on this? Has the band Cameo done something with Cameo yet?
Oh man, that would be so good.
Like, how much would you pay just to have him say, "Ronald, ow," or whatever, and then like that would be it?
Strawberry, raspberry.
Ow.
There's got to be a commercial. There's got to be a commercial in the future for them if they.
It seems like
start, promoting a little more.
That would be so good.
I guess
I'd love that.
It would be entertaining in the least.
Yes.
So just real quick, like basically, since we kind of stopped recording, back in the middle of December before the holidays, like a couple pretty big movies came out. The big things that we had been talking about for months and months and months about, the big blockbuster coming home day and date, and there were really kind of two that we could kind of talk about a little bit. Wonder Woman 84 premiering on Disney Plus same day as theaters, and Soul coming out on Disney Plus. HBO Max, sorry. Wonder Woman 84 is HBO Max, Soul's Disney Plus. Exclusively on Disney Plus here in the United States. So, Soul opened internationally in theaters where they're open and where they can, exhibit the films. But, those two films coming out, right on the holidays, Christmas Day, I believe, both of them came out. It seemed, you could look anywhere, I feel like, and there was no lack of just people checking in, watching one or other or both of them. And it did seem like there was like a mass acceptance beyond talking about the movies or the quality of the movies or what those movies mean for the franchises that they're a part of or the studios that they're coming from. I just wanted to mention that, like, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, it just seemed like I don't know that I've seen people so engaged in terms of watching something that opening weekend, maybe with the exception of like the Avengers Endgame, or Infinity War, where so many people were like posting one or other or both of those titles having watched them.
Yes.
And, that level of engagement and just the level of, I guess, access is one of the things coming to mind. Like we always talk about this in terms of like the people that pay money to see theatrical releases in the theater versus people that just wait for it to come home. And the fact that you had these two massive titles for 2020 kind of ending the year, and both of them were available, as a part of a standard subscription package, not an additional fee or anything like that. I just was really taken by how many people I saw posting about movies that I never see posting about movies, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever it was. It's just everybody seemed to be engaged in somehow, whether they liked the movie or didn't. But people were watching these movies opening weekend, and that was pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, it makes me happy, man. Like there's something to be said about the conversation that's been created around this whole thing. I don't know why people feel like they're stealing when they say I'm gonna subscribe and then I'm gonna unsubscribe after I watch the movie. That's what they want you to do. Sure. I don't know why. I don't know when this became like a thing where people felt like they were hustling these services. They want you. You've spent the money already, and that's okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, I think, and two movies that couldn't have been any more different. Right. Soul, Pixar. That the home family feeling that Pixar movies bring, and popcorn action film, a superhero film that couldn't have been more different and couldn't have had more different reactions to very different receptions. So how'd you guys feel about it?
I mean, I think for me, it's like you kind of alluded to this, Steve, but I just want to underline this is two examples of that thing we were talking about all year, which is like what's going to be the first sort of blockbuster that goes straight to home viewing. Right. And I think it was the perfect storm of that. Boy, that's a thing. If you go back, if you want to turn this show into a drinking game, the perfect storm is something that I say too often. And I'm trying to stop saying it. But so you guys help me out. Next time I say it, like just say mean things to me or something, like treat me bad. But it's the perfect conflagration of things. But I mean, it's like people were at home and they were used to watching things at home, and they're used to sort of finding a new way to feel hyped about something. And this was something that the marketing, I think, did get out there that this was coming. And everyone is already also using social media in this way now that's a little bit more expressive. The thing you said, Steve, I hadn't really thought about that. But yes, I would say even just during COVID, people who I know who never posted about television or movies are much more likely now to say, oh, we just binged this and we're moving on to this. So it's like this was the moment when and it was Christmas, and I think on Christmas you already get that sense that people are just sort of checking in, saying like what little family thing they're doing, what thing that sounds like togetherness, or what little thing that's tapping into that greater consciousness, and what could be a greater way for us. I think anyone in the world, but I think particularly Americans, we tap into that greater consciousness through big shiny mass market entertainment a lot, So I felt the warmth almost in a strange way of these movies being available on that day in that way. And it was cool. And it made the experience of watching it kind of neat. I mean, all of this stuff has been sort of new, but it was sort of fun to be like, oh yeah, the whole family's invested in this. Like we watched Wonder Woman on Christmas Day, and it was like we all have been kind of wishing for this movie, and then we saw it and we renounced our wish.
Yeah.
Yo,
transition.
Bippity boppity boop.
We take it back.
Didn't hate, but I would say the enthusiasm in the room started to kind of flag.
Came out.
One. Whereas I would say Soul kind of continues to up the ante, and for me, it sort of went beyond what I was beginning to think a quote unquote Pixar formula movie would do. Like once again, found a new way to tap into my feels. So if this was a derby, Soul won the Christmas Day blockbuster derby. But still, I don't begrudge the experience we had sitting down as a family to watch Wonder Woman 84, because that was just insane to see a movie that huge at home.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Go ahead, Steve. Steve, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to echo that. Like that feeling of something that big being just where you physically sat in your house, like, whatever your setup is, even if somebody watched it on their tablet or their screen, whatever it looks like, just the idea of a movie that large. And Soul is by no means a small film. Like, none of Pixar's movies are small. These are really huge productions with big budgets and years and years and years of production. And just the idea of just like being able to casually not be stressed out about anything and watch that was huge, I think. And you know, and we made a big deal out of it, kind of like you were saying, John. Like that night, Christmas night, we watched Wonder Woman, and you know, it did feel like we made a big deal out of it, like, you know, and we did our little cross country thing with my friend in Arizona, and we watched it together, and it's like, you know, and it just felt like a Friday night movie thing. Like it felt really nice. And yeah, you know, discussing the quality of the movie, just the experience, I think, you know, really speaks to, you know, what could be, you know, especially like when you're experiencing titles that are like, you know, really moving movies, or like just really expertly done big blockbusters that you just like are buzzing about afterwards, you know, because I didn't feel that way about Wonder Woman, but I mean, I know some people who did, and I'm jealous of that, because I want that, you know, you want to feel that in your home and where you're most comfortable. So like that's something to look forward to if that continues. Like some of the other, you know, HBO Max titles that are coming out even within the next week or so, like I'm really looking forward to The Little Things, and I think that looks amazing. And I want to watch that on my, you know, same thing that night it comes out. I want to watch that in my nice little setup that I have in my basement, and I'm looking forward to that feeling of just being comfortable watching like a huge Hollywood production like that.
Yeah, you know, as you two have alluded to, Wonder Woman in 1984 felt like the rug was pulled from under us. There was a tone that the first movie had that this one does not have. It was a consistency and a feel of like, oh man, this is fresh. This woman is badass, that I feel like was kind of taken from us for whatever reason. And some of it may have been the reception was exceptional for the first one. So that could have done something to somebody where they're like, you know what? Okay, cool. Well, I was going to make it this kind of movie. I'm going to do something a little non-traditional.
Right.
And because of that, you know, people just wanted to see a woman kick ass. And they got a melodrama. They got basically a soap opera. Yeah. And it made me think about something in particular. So HBO Max, as we know, has some rules to these releases. Like, I think when something good comes out, you'll feel that feeling of that time block that you have to watch it and when it'll be removed. You know, there's going to be movies that come out this year, like maybe the King Kong movie or something like that, where people are like, oh my God, did you see that movie? It's going to be gone in 3 days. Like, hurry up and see it. It's going to be gone. Wonder Woman could leave and I wouldn't think twice about it. And that doesn't feel good.
I hadn't even thought about that part of it until you said it. So that tells me something, because you're right. If I had loved this movie or had felt that charge, we would have watched it a couple times, being those sneaky stealers you were talking about, Ronald, being like, oh, folks, hey, pro tip, before it leaves the service, watch it a couple more times, you know?
Yes.
But I mean, like, no, I definitely think that would have been the feeling. And I think what's interesting is now that we're a little bit removed, because we didn't do an episode right after watching this movie, a lot of my feelings about it are kind of dissipating. I kind of have this sort of, it wasn't for me kind of feeling. Rather than like this desire to sit down and nitpick. I think there was so much discourse about this. You saw how many people didn't like this, and then you saw the people that were like, oh, I really liked it. And I think the whole tonal thing you're talking about, the most interesting thing to me about my own sort of lukewarm response to it is that it's like if Guardians of the Galaxy 2 had been a misfire, in my opinion. I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I know some people that didn't, thought it wasn't as good as the first one. But it's I went to that movie that was the sequel to a movie that was such a success that they basically brought more or less the same team back to say, okay, do what you want. Yeah. And I think I was a little, I guess, sad, disappointed, alienated, whatever, by the fact that what Patty Jenkins wanted to do when she had that leeway was something that I wasn't that interested in. Because I'm excited about her, and I'm excited about her getting to make the kind of movies she wants to make. In this case, though, I don't think that I was not the intended audience for the movie that she wanted to make. And not because of any one thing about the movie. I hear people talk about the sort of silly retro tone. I enjoyed Shazam, so I don't think I'm bothered by a silly retro tone. I mean, actors I was really excited to see, like Pedro Pascal, just fell flat for me or actively annoyed me in this movie. I just felt, as it was going along, my own kind of interest in it was kind of dissipating. And sitting now a few weeks away from it, I don't want to bury the movie necessarily, but I am thinking like how strange it is that like, oh, a surefire thing. Patty Jenkins is getting to, you liked what she did before? Well, now they know that was a success and they're bringing the team back to do another one. And then that they do this kind of, again, a slightly more experimental, more personal movie maybe than I was wanting to see. But I can't tell if this is a movie that failed for me because of how personal and unique it was, or if it's a movie that fails for more structural, creative reasons. But I don't know. I kind of feel like the conversation's already been had, and we're sort of tagging our thoughts on about this movie.
Yeah, and we don't need to go on long about it. But I think you're being pretty kind. I think the movie's a mess, and I think that, I think the idea that Patty Jenkins was able to make this movie. I want to say something real quick, and I genuinely believe is I think that Warner Brothers and HBO, like the decision that they made for 2021 and what they're doing, is one thing. But I think that their commitment to putting Wonder Woman 84 out on Christmas Day, as whether that's like a launch pad for that initiative or whatever, I think behind closed doors, I think there's an acceptance that this movie's not good. I don't know that this movie is the kind of movie that that's worth, and I acknowledge that they did not do this for other titles either, but like holding or delaying or whatever until further down the line, like some studios are doing for their properties. I really think that there's so many issues with this movie. I don't know that it was worth like going back and remarketing it time and time again. I think that ultimately it was something that like they just decided to put on streaming to promote HBO Max and, to basically launch into another thing that they had with, what they've done for 2021, because the 2021 announcement is not something that they really have to hold to. If the world returns to any sort of normalcy, there's nothing stopping them from being like, oh, the second half of the year, we're not going to do that anymore. Like, we're going to just go back to theaters. But for the first few months of the year, they're going to stick to this. And I think that Wonder Woman kind of being that first mover for what they were trying to do, I believe I gotta believe that they know this in the movie was not what they thought it was going to be, and I don't think anybody does. I mean, like, I know people who have enjoyed the film, and I'm jealous of that, kind of like John. Like, I wanted to like this movie more, and I didn't love Wonder Woman. I love her as Wonder Woman, and I loved about 2/3 of Wonder Woman. The first film. The back third of that film, I think, again, the word a mess kind of falls in out of my mouth common, like with these DC movies. But I just think that this movie felt that way for the better part of the film. And I just want to say one thing, that in the movie, one of the things even weeks after, I still cannot let go of, even though I do feel like the movie has drifted out of my mind, is that of all the things in this film that are wished to be, why is the Steve character a body swap?
Yes. What was that?
That is something that has bugged me since watching that movie. And
because it introduces issues and story points that you wouldn't have to deal with at all if it was just magic.
Yeah, like everything else was.
It could just be magic, and you wouldn't need to understand it. Yeah. And I would say that the reason why that really bugs me is because you hear people talk about the actual sort of consent issus this brings up.
Oh my God,
who this guy is. But let's assume that the story wants to deal with a body swap comedy aspect, right? They don't.
At all.
There's not a single scene where he has to pretend to be the other guy in a moment. There's not a sense that this guy is some guy who has some entree into some world that they're going to use his face or his identity. So they make it a body. It's almost like that's an 80s trope they threw in, and we're like, oh, people will enjoy the fact that we got a body swap idea in here and chuckle at it and move beyond. And they didn't expect how savvy the audience was going to be, because I saw instantly people saying, this movie grosses me out because of how this character is dealt with. And sometimes you can feel people bringing real world concerns into magic storytelling, and you go, okay, let's give this movie leeway. But in this case, it's like, no, they didn't do anything to earn that plot point. It was totally unnecessary.
So weird.
And you're right. It just makes you think about how wishy-washy, no pun intended, the whole wish thing to me as a storyline, I was like, this is risky because there's wishing going on, but there's no parameters or sense of what the rules are, and it just felt to me like a 7-year-old wrote that part of the story or something.
Didn't a man wish that his wife died?
Yeah.
Everybody had a shitty wish. Not one person wished for like cancer to be gone or something like that. Everybody was selfish.
I have look, this movie was, so I feel you on the first Wonder Woman. I felt a little weird about that too, but it was solid.
It was third act. It was the CGI third act that everybody.
Everything
sort of
before that was
forgets
great.
about.
Everything before that was great.
Yeah.
I think for most people, that movie stopped when she did the No Man's Land charge. That was like the climax of the movie. You forget about what's his name, David Thewlis turning into a pixel man.
Yeah.
It went from that to like me watching this movie and saying, I never want to see Patty Jenkins make a movie ever again. That it felt that weird. Like it was like that jarring of a
like what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. It felt and there's like talk that Patty had a vision and she was just like, I'm doing this. I don't care what you say. And Warner Brothers is like, okay, the first one worked. I'm going to give you leeway. And then this is what came. I just think there are stronger directors, women that could make movies that cater to all audiences, hit all sectors, that are considerate of issues that are going on in the world. I just think Patty Jenkins, man, and she's supposed to be making a Star Wars movie.
I know. Before
she's making a third Wonder Woman. They've already announced that too.
But that was the big out of the Star Wars announcements. Patty Jenkins is doing a Star Wars movie was like wow to me, and now I'm like. It's kind of the way I felt about Colin Trevorrow after seeing, what was it, The Book of Henry? Was that the name of that movie?
Yeah.
Like when he was set to do the third Star Wars movie in that trilogy. As it turns out, his story ideas might have not been that much worse than what they ended up doing or whatever. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about those movies. But I remember at the time getting worried about the next Star Wars movie when I saw The Book of Henry. And I cannot pretend this didn't make me feel the same way, where I was like, okay, doesn't mean it won't be good. Just means I'm not going, all right, Patty Jenkins, she's doing it. And again, I hope she continues to get the kind of, I think a lot of male directors have a career that is not sunk by one big movie that leaves people cold. So I don't want to see that happen to her. But it does, if you're just going to take the gender out of the situation, then you have to say, what does this do to your excitement for her next project? For me, it dampens it.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Moving off of Wonder Woman 84, anything quick do you want to mention about Soul before we move on to the kind of like the guts of our episode?
I thought it was super powerful when it got to where it was going. Like, there was a midsection of that movie where I was like, oh, it's Pixar up to its old tricks again. And then there was a point where it moved a little beyond that into what the real point of the thing, like where, what the focus was. And I was like, I'm at a point in my life where I'm asking these questions about direction and purpose. And the fact that the movie brings those questions up without coming up with a pat answer to them, I thought was one of those Pixar little, they appeal to the maturity in us as adults, and I think they coach kids on a certain kind of maturity or something. That movie has a mature attitude about accepting what you can't understand.
Yeah.
I would say Soul. I would say Soul, like with the opposite of Wonder Woman, like where it kind of left my mind. Like afterwards, like I feel like I've actually rewatched Soul like 3 times since it came out. I mean, partially because my daughter loves it, and like I really liked it the first time I watched it, but as I watch it more, it's like I've grown to like I love that movie. Like it's there, like what John said. There's so much going on, and when it gets to what it's really saying, and the way that it does that, and again, like the way that Pete Docter, he's amazing. Like some of my favorite Pixar films are the ones that he's kind of put into the world. I just think that he's on like another level in terms of the storytelling and the way they kind of like dole out some of these little the bits of information that you learn as you're going through the narrative that really kind of drive home what they're trying to say. And again, like weird things like having Reznor and Ross do the score. Like I think the score for the movie is amazing. Like I thought that stood out to me immediately, and
unique. Like it's something new for a Pixar movie to feel that electronic and that modern. And I think that the animation reflected that too. There were some neat modern attempts at doing something different with really high budget animation, but doing something minimalist. And the music kept. Honestly, those elements were palpably different for this movie.
But get Ronald.
It's I'd say it's Pixar's artsiest. It's easiest to understand. Like, I feel like sometimes when they have these big ideas, sometimes they can be really hard to explain. When you go back and try to explain them to people, like, man, it works like this and this. I could put this movie in front of anybody and they'd get it really quickly.
Right.
Representation obviously is a thing that I love about it. It's just a beautifully told story.
And beautiful. Like, it's a beautiful film,
yeah.
too.
I mean, like, if
amazing.
you have anything from a phone screen to an iPad to a Android tablet, this thing looks crystal clear, beautiful. Yeah. Every shot looks like a still. I think that it's one of the better, if not within my top 3 Pixar movies of all time. It just does something that a lot of the other ones didn't do for me, but that doesn't mean that they weren't good. I'm just saying, it kicked in something like the depth. We got to stop calling these kids movies, man. Can we stop doing that?
Steve,
they're
can
not
you please
kids
stop?
Movies, man. They're not kids movies, man. These death and all this stuff is a really heavy thing to put on a kid. And,
but I think what John said is the key. I think it's a great way to put it, is that they're coaching. I think it's a really important thing to show kids. There's so much texture and nuance to these films that don't exist in a lot of other animation that, kids of a certain age watch. It's a little more surface level type things. And I think it's a real opportunity when you watch these with your children, and, especially if your child's of a certain age, it is a coaching opportunity. It is an opportunity to talk about things, concepts that they maybe don't know and don't understand. And it's at least like a opportunity to open the door to something, and not that they're going to need to understand this movie on the first watch, or really ever, depending how old they are, because there's still something there for kids to look at and laugh at or whatever. But I think it is really good to think of it as a coaching opportunity, because it does open the door to heavy concepts. And like, we as adults, as mature adults, like, it's kind of mind-blowing in ways how they come up with to explain these things. Like thinking of this, and even like Inside Out, are the two that really kind of come to mind. Like, it's just ingenious. Like, it's really just so impressive that they see this opportunity to not dumb things down enough that, somebody could get it on a first watch, like that you don't need to, everybody's going to get what they get out of this movie. And, if a kid loves it, I guarantee you my child who's 3 is loving this movie for not any reason like that we're talking about. There's other things, but 5 years from now when she watches it, or 10 years from now when she watches it, there'll be things there for her to learn about, and I'll look forward to being able to talk to her about those things. So, that's something that I look forward to, and that's something that I think that Pixar provides value in filmmaking that doesn't exist in a lot of other places.
Well, that's the reason. Oh, go ahead, Ronald.
It's doing good work. I'll say that, man. Like, if there's anything that I could take out of these movies, like, whatever. I know this is like a weird thing to say, but it's like there's like kind of humanitarian work being done. Like, there's
absolutely
like a level of like trying to explain life and death in a way that isn't hypercritical of life choices and all that stuff, but think about it. Like, don't be a terrible person.
Yeah.
But think about it. Think about your path. Think about how you treat people. Think about that stuff. That's just so beautiful, man. I take that out of all the films, but this one, it hit me extra hard. So,
yeah, I that's why when you guys asked me, I had seen it before you had, and I said it might be middle of the pack Pixar, but it's still really great. Like, I just meant they've done this so many times where they do one of these movies, and so to me, the whole thing is, how do I feel about it the next day, the week later, whatever. And to echo what you said a minute ago, Steve, I found myself thinking about this movie so much after I saw it that I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, they got me again.
It
even
planted the seed,
Yeah, and they really, I mean, the Inside Out comparison, I would think Coco too. These movies that take something metaphysical that we've all thought about and manage to make it into something tangible and make it into like a parable or something, that illustrates things. I would actually add to what you said about watching it with a 3-year-old, Steve, because I remember watching Toy Story 3. That was, I think, Henry's favorite or first movie in the theaters. Like, we took him to see that because we wanted to see it. And I was beside myself because he was a toddler and I was watching this in the third one. That's where you get all the stuff with Andy growing up, so it was totally like hitting these buttons for me as a big kid looking at my kid. And then, but he does absorb, maybe not from the movie, but from us, the themes that we think are important. So it's also like, again, I mean, not to say that you won't be the kind of dad like I would be. Like, we all are doing this thing nowadays, where we sit down and we talk about our feelings with our kids. We should be.
Yeah.
But these movies give you this weird framework, and I think what you might be surprised with one day with Sid is that there'll be like a shared sort of way of, it's like sensitivity is a hard thing sometimes with kids that are growing up, like how to coach them in that stuff. You have a shared cultural framework of movies that have dealt with these things. I mean, not to be too corny about it, but what you said about the kind of higher purpose of Pixar, Ronald, there is something that beyond the fact that they're going to make, all this money and the fact that they know they've got this huge hold on like the market of family viewing. The best Pixar movies really do try to give you a little something extra about humanity that sticks with you. And whether it's like intended to be, this salve for the soul, or if it's a marketing thing and they're just really good at it. I mean, they nail something. And they get something about existence that they're willing to explore. If you haven't seen Soul because you just didn't know what the hook of it was, or you didn't quite gather from the marketing what it is, I assure you there's a point midway into the movie when the hook of the movie will get you, and you'll be sort of glad that you got to discover it in the movie and not, from the trailer.
Yeah, totally agree. So Wonder Woman 84, it's going to be on HBO Max for, I guess, another few days, right? Isn't it 31 days or something like that? Yeah. Disney Plus got Soul. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend that one if you haven't come around to that. But so now we'll move to talk more about a couple shows that we have been watching. I guess the first one, we were fortunate enough to be able to check out some episodes of the second season of Servant on Apple TV Plus, the series that's produced by M. Night Shyamalan. And I think in general, weren't we all kind of like positive on the first season?
Yeah. I mean, I
was let down by the very last episode of the season. I remember thinking that wherever it was going, it didn't get me enough. It didn't leave me at the right place. But I remember it was on my like best TV of the year list, but I had not seen the last episode or two of the season, and I said that could mess it up for me. And I do think it wouldn't have been on my top list had I seen the last episode, but the tone and the feel of this show and the atmosphere of it is so much what you want from it anyway, getting to watch more of it, part of it is just dipping into that mood and that tone again, because this is like, it's M. Night Shyamalan. It's like that thing he does where he writes characters that behave and speak like no other human beings ever have. Like you wonder what people he's been around. But it's like once you accept this is like heightened land, this is like actors doing something interesting land. It's the second season so far. I would say it's just as weird and interesting, and the atmosphere is just as present as it was in the first. And it's maybe a little bit zanier in terms of what's actually happening in the story. Like it moves a little faster, and yet still feels like the slowest burn ever.
Yeah. Look, we can only talk about the first two, right? Like the first two episodes are fresh in my mind. This picks up only a couple of minutes, right? Couple of minutes after the first season ends, which I love, by the way. I don't like when they're like 6 months later. This picks up right in the middle of the action. And I gotta say, like, sometimes in M. Night's creating these worlds, I get so confused by what I'm supposed to be rooting for or against or pacing. Is there something wrong? Like, I feel like I'm in this world, but like it decides when it wants to move really slow and really fast. I'm very confused about the pacing of things and the way that time works in this world.
And you wonder how deliberate the laughs, like you're laughing at it, and you know that sometimes you're supposed to, and sometimes you wonder if you're supposed to. No, Ronald, you seem to be talking about a ripple effect of the kind of heightened, bizarro world where you don't. Remember when we said, and this is a different thing, but it's a similar feeling as a viewer, when we said that we couldn't quite read some of Nicole Kidman's acting in The Undoing, and the camera is playing on her as though we're supposed to be getting something from her, but we're not sure we're getting it. I think that sort of mood thing, when you have characters that act like nobody's supposed to act and they're doing things that you wouldn't do, it's hard to know what you're supposed to think of their behavior. Are we supposed to think they're all fools? Are we supposed to think, I would do the same thing in this situation? I think that is like... Sometimes, and maybe that's a part of this show's appeal, is that it does put you in this weird world. Like the second season, much more so than the first, to me feels like, well, there's nobody here acting normal. Like there's nobody here that is doing anything that's like a semblance of like logical behavior. But again, I wonder how intentional that is. It really does seem like they're embracing something bizarre about the tone of this show. Like the actors seem to be leaning into it. So I wonder if that's the point of this thing, is just to present us with so much weirdness.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, you won't see anything like this. Like, I guess Bly Banner would probably be the closest thing in terms of, like a horror based episodic thing that's going on.
Yeah.
But this is something within itself. It feels like just a movie that is split up in the episodes. Like if that gives anybody any context, it really is. The pacing is like a movie. The pacing is like something out of a crazy M. Night Shyamalan worst case scenario horror film. And I think there's something about that is very unique that I couldn't suggest anything to counter that in terms of like, man, here's something like this but better. I don't know anything that really exists like this in episodic TV. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know. Is that weird? That you know what I mean? Like, it
has a lot of things that feel different about it. Honestly, right down to like the opening sequence, the way that it ends right when an image is starting to emerge, and the fact that it's like a half-hour show rather than an hour-long show. Most shows of this tone would be hour-long. There's so much about it that feels different, and kind of the rhythm of it is off-putting. That I feel like that has to be intentional. But you're right, Ronald, that feeling of being off-put is a large part of watching the show.
Yes. Yeah. And I know that some of it is. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Man. No, go ahead.
No, I just think there's something about whatever the mysticism behind whatever's happening does lend itself to some of the like tug of war that's happening with somebody trying to figure it out, and there's a power dynamic that's happening. Like people are trying to make sense of things, and that shifts the dynamic a little bit. And sometimes when you're in somebody's world, the time is a little different than it would be if you're in some of the scarier characters in this show. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really don't know where I fall on this show right now. Like, I feel like I came out of the first season, with the exception of that last episode, like John said, really a pretty big fan of the show. But I think the thing that really is kind of so far in this season, and I know it's early for what we're able to talk about, but I think one of the elements, like the whole child element being removed in this first episode, how season one ends, the looming kind of presence of what ultimately sets this whole story into play. I feel like so far, it's hurting this season for me. I feel like, the game, or like the problem, or the mystery, whatever you want to call this, that they're kind of working through in these first couple episodes to learn more about the cult, and to like learn more, where's Leanne, things like that. Like, I feel like it's becoming more of I feel like that kind of approach to it is really kind of making the things that John said earlier about like these characters. While I love these character actors a lot, like I love Toby Kebbell in general, specifically him, a lot of the things that are happening in the show, you start to pay more attention to how they just don't make sense when, they are not kind of still overshadowed by what is going on with the child, from the first season. And I think that child not being present, or, that not being constantly what we're talking about, or like seeing as a reminder, because there's something to be said for like that visual reminder in that first season of seeing that doll, and seeing a child, and seeing a doll that is maybe now a child, like the weirdness of that.
There's a weird bit of movie magic to that, Steve, honestly,
sure.
That's disquieting, but even though they can just cut to a child or the doll, but You're right, the tension between seeing that very lifelike doll and then seeing the human kid, and in the first season not necessarily understanding why it's one at one time and a different at another. You're right. No, honestly, that's the simplicity of that is almost entirely missing from what we jump into with season 2.
So far, you know what I mean? We'll talk more about the series as it goes along, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, the slowness, like the plotting, like I'm all in on the long game and like waiting it out. But I just feel like a lack of a presence that I think is really kind of what made the show for me the first season. And it does feel like there's a bit of a spinning wheel happening right now, where
an apple spinning wheel,
or like a blood, sweat, and tears spinning wheel.
You take your pick, but I just like, of spending too much time with characters going over and over and over things that no one would go over once, and we're going over them multiple times with them while we're waiting for more information about, the kid or this cult or whatever it might be. But I'm a little cold on this season personally so far, but we'll see as it goes along. Kind of where if that changes, but.
I think thriller storylines depend on like relatable behavior for you to feel
totally
ensnared in them. And I think if you're too off footing, it's like, and it's why some people like can't handle something like David Lynch or something, even though there's a lot of cool pulp or genre elements in something like that. But the fact that it sometimes might end on a weird rhythmic beat or not a plot beat, like people can't handle storytelling or tend to not favor storytelling that doesn't let them get a footing and doesn't let them know who they should be rooting for. So I do think that is kind of an issue. And I also think the M. Night Shyamalan method, like I think part of that disappointment, like if it were a 1 or 2 season show or even just one bang up like 10 episode story, I think that the tension and my interest level would be so much more like I'd feel much more comfortable investing it. But when I heard even in the first season that he had a plan for like 5 or 6 seasons, I was like, so you mean we won't really know what this is about for that long? Because if anybody can make you wait to find out what's going on, we know he can do it. And I honestly think, and we're about to talk about another show that has a serialized structure that I think might be part of the appeal. I think that in this case, knowing M. Night Shyamalan, like it made the first season interesting because it's like, oh, wow, this is his energy transported to a show. But his ideas are so hermetically sealed with the amount of details that come in, that like it lays down that twist and that suspense and that mystery. It's so exacting. I think television show worlds have to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more, have more characters and story moving in and out of it. And honestly, I think in the second season, it's hard to figure out what the world thinks is going on and why their house isn't crawling with cops and why they aren't world famous just for what they know they've done. Like it would appear to people that she had a kid and then doesn't have a kid, and yet she's back to work, but she's kind of acting crazy. I mean, I don't want to say too much, but I'm just saying I kept feeling that same thing of like again, like I said, shouldn't the cops be involved? Like, shouldn't they have more more explaining to do about what they're doing? These people. But once you realize, nope, the whole point is like to get away from that reality. You have to kind of accept it or not. But I think that's one thing that does hurt the thriller aspects of this is that it doesn't feel like they exist in. I mean, I keep saying this, but it's another way it doesn't exist in a world I recognize. Is that they. The story went beyond, like in a movie, you can do that. You can keep it so hermetically sealed and just let this detail in and this detail in, and then at the end have the twist. With a show, you need more story than that. You need more character than that. And if he's just going to try to draw out this central mystery of what the hell is going on for 6 seasons, it
might be a challenge.
Yeah.
So that second episode of season 2 will, I guess, air the day this podcast comes out. But the premiere of season 2 was on the 15th. For those looking for it, on Apple.
And you can go back and watch all of season 1. So
binge
it.
The other one that you just mentioned, John, that we're going to get into a little bit now. We got the first 2 episodes from WandaVision on Disney Plus. Just like kind of Marvel's first kind of. The MCU, Marvel Entertainment, the MCU as we know it, getting into like serialized, TV series, all within the same universe that we've spent, the last decade plus with. And this is kind of the start of, I guess this is the start of the whole like phase 4 effort that Marvel's going to be putting forward. And this is the first one that comes out. This is the series just dropped last week, the first 2 episodes, and then they're going to do the episodes weekly. And like you mentioned, I think, before we were recording, Ronald, something interesting you mentioned was that, like, that they're kind of promoting the idea that, this series, as they kind of dole out the episodes, will eventually lead in to, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is the next one, which will eventually lead into Loki, which is the next one. Meanwhile, in this theatrical world, they're going to still have Marvel movies coming out eventually in some way, shape, or form that will all be a part of the same thing. So that's really kind of wild. It's a first kind of its kind, and that's nothing new from Marvel because they're kind of breaking the mold with everything that they do with their storytelling, with the IP that they have. And it's some of the most beloved, most successful, most positive, most people can talk pretty positively of this. But yeah, this is the first one that come out on the streamer on Disney Plus, episodes 1 and 2, as they are titled, episode 1 and 2. What was your take on this? I guess, Ronald, if you want to kind of jump in first.
So I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I've been counting down the days because Steve, you and I bought years and years worth of Disney And obviously
we are what they call early adopters.
yes, and a lot of it obviously for the back catalog. But let's be honest,
definitely.
We were very excited about the Marvel product, and it took a little while for it to come out.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say, these first 2 episodes are so jam-packed full of content that I'm a little overwhelmed a little bit in a good way. I'm thinking, how are they going to resolve this in 8, 9 episodes?
Right.
I think 9 total.
Yeah.
9, yeah.
But what I've seen, this sort of homage to the Dick Van Dyke Show and Bewitched is some of the best. I mean, even if these were just sitcom episodes, some of the best TV I've seen in a really long time. Some heartwarming material that just has a lot of stuff. It's kind of like the way we were talking about Pixar. 2 things happening at once. You're watching something, you're like, okay, you could watch that as a sitcom. Somebody could come in and watch it and be like, man, this is the craziest sitcom I've ever seen. Or if you're watching it as a Marvel fan, it's jam-packed full of hints of things that are to come. And I'm excited as shit, man. I'm perfect 2 episodes. I mean, weird as hell, but damn near perfect in their presentation and what they're bringing to the table. And I'm super excited.
Yeah, there are 2 words that are kind of in my mind based on what you guys said and kind of what I was thinking watching this show. There's boldness, which is like we've been criticizing Marvel kind of even when we love the movies for not trying to break the mold, not trying to break the stylistic template, the tone, that Marvel house style. And I think this show feels somehow like it's got that Marvel patina over it still. It fits in.
Definitely, yeah.
But it's different. Yeah. And the fact that they're willing to let you get 2 episodes, like when they released 2 episodes, I thought, oh, there must be something in the second episode that takes this concept a little further because, a lot of times when they do that, you can tell they want audiences to know what they're getting. They don't want to give you a first episode that leaves you going, huh?
And leave you, lose you.
But I was kind of surprised. It got to the end of the second one, and it didn't do that much to break the concept or to go beyond the kind of what the heck is happening here feeling.
Right.
And that's my other word. There's boldness, and then there's mystery. And I think this is something Marvel hasn't been able to do for us yet that the comics used to be able to do all the time. Have a storyline going for a while where you're like, what is happening? Who's the villain? Where are they? What is this world? And I think the movies, even though they can preserve the twist, like for instance, Jake Gyllenhaal, the character he was playing was sort of kept from the marketing, but everybody knew from the earliest casting announcement, Jake Gyllenhaal's playing the villain, and it's probably this, and there's this reference, and there's that. So you go into a Marvel movie kind of knowing what the general plot might be. I mean, they have pulled the rug out from under us in a few key ways, but in general, you know who the villain is, you know what the story is, you know how this might connect even to the next movie and then the next movie. Yeah. We don't know that about WandaVision. I mean, we've heard about how it sets up things for the new Spider-Man. We've heard that she's going to be a big character in the Doctor Strange movie coming next year. So I think we're getting into multiverse stuff. I think we're getting into like the extent of her powers, which comic fans are excited about because she can do amazing shit. World-changing shit. So it's cool to see them tapping into that. And yet, episode 2, because they can do this now, they can almost take the Star Wars approach to the marketing and just show you a few clips and say, you're going to watch this. You don't need to know what the story is. You don't need to know who the villain is. There's so many great actors in this. If you look at the casting list, there's old favorites from Marvel. There's still a few new people coming in. I find that part of it really exciting. The fact that it's something new and that I don't know what it is yet. And unlike Servant, and unlike Wonder Woman, I'm trusting the MCU at this point. That they have even taken the extra time they have to polish this into something that's going to feel essential and fun, and like you guys were saying, something the family can sit down and watch and be like, "What?" That's a great feeling. Yeah. That's super fun. Like my son, who's 13, who you would think would be checked out of the sitcom parodies, was totally down with it and said that was like a good sitcom on top of what it is. But he also was like, it gets to that part where each episode has some element where you start to see what's happening here. Yeah. My son found those things really compelling. Like, so if you're worried, is this something that only people who are nostalgic for some of these old sitcoms will enjoy? That's not even the case. This show manages to sort of like explain itself on its own terms to you, even if you're not feeling the retro nostalgia part.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's so much going on in these shows, like Rana was saying, and I think that in this show rather, but I think it's something that Marvel, while they've been criticized, like you said, John, for maybe not breaking that mold or kind of going a little off and doing something different. It does seem that, a lot of these things that they've announced from this phase 4, whether it's theatrical or streaming, they do seem a little different across the board. There does seem to be, enough of the things that you're used to, but enough of like different kinds of movies, like what they've been promoting the Doctor Strange film as being, and all the crazy rumors about what Spider-Man 3 will be. So it does feel like they're trying to take the uniqueness of each property even further than they had before. And this is like the prime example probably of anything Marvel's done of how weird it can get. And I think that's really important, not only for Marvel, for the MCU, but I think it's important for like the Disney Plus platform, because, I think it will kind of really show people that are in on the MCU how important this could be to what they want to watch, in their movies. And I think that, they've been promoting that hardcore from the jump when they announced these shows. But even from 2 episodes in, you can really kind of get a sense of what this is going to mean for movies and, where this does tie into some of the bigger theatrical titles for some characters that we don't get to spend a lot of time with, in the big titles. You don't get to spend a lot with Vision and Wanda, or, with Bucky and, the Falcon, or even Loki, like these are characters that people really love. And like these shows really kind of give an opportunity for those characters to kind of become a little more fleshed out. These actors and actresses time to shine in these roles, which I think they really do. And I think Elizabeth Olsen is doing some, she's great in this series so far, better than she's been in any of the movies. And that's key too, because I mean, like, it really does build out this stable of talent that Marvel has invested so much time and money into, that they can put a show like this out and not have it be a marquee character per se, and like it's really, really captivating and really great. And the idea of what this show will be in terms of like these different episodes being like different generational sitcoms, just that element of like what the sitcoms look like generationally, from like the 50s to the 90s or whatever, the current day, whatever it ends up being. I think that even lends itself a lot to the storytelling of maybe where this show is going, or where a lot of people think this show is going. But just a really unique and original idea. And I think that, that's a big swing for Marvel. And I think it's a real big, it's a pretty big flex too, to know that you can make something this odd. And everybody that I've talked to has like really been into it. And, people, again, we talked about at the top of the show, the access to this. I've seen more people posting about WandaVision, on Friday and Saturday than I've seen posts about most things that have come out. That's just maybe with the exception of Mandalorian, which is also on that platform. But, it's the title that everybody's talking about, to the point that like my wife's father, who I don't even know if he's ever watched a Marvel movie. I'm sure he has, but like he's texting me asking me for my Disney Plus login because he wants to watch WandaVision. That's how much it's permeated, the culture in terms of how important these
That's
titles
cute
are.
AF, Steve. That's cute AF.
Cute AF. Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's just that kind of thing where like, I think they've earned it. And I think that they really are just kind of like plowing into this uncharted territory for entertainment and, just storytelling, and what they can do with 2 different playing fields, 2 different ways of experiencing these titles. And I mean, I'm excited to watch more of this one. I really love the first 2 episodes, and I'm excited to see where they go with it.
We mentioned how good she is. Paul Bettany is so pitch perfect.
Oh my God.
In this, and seems to be having a blast. Like, I mean, if you look at it, you go, okay, if you're an actor, this show is going to give you this fun acting challenge of like miming but mimicking the sort of tone of light comedy acting for that decade. And I'm getting really excited about where they might go with some of the later, more kind of cynical forms of comedy that they might do. But I just wanted to add something on to what you were saying there, Steve, for just a second about the level these characters are at. Scarlet Witch and Vision have decades of great stories in the comics. So there's all this character development, and their romance is a big part of different parts of their story. Those are things, you're right, you can show in the movie, and these big movies that have 20 or 30 characters they're trying to service, and you can give them moments. Those are good characters in the movies that they're in. But the idea of getting to spend actual time with them, like a little bit of laid back time, is something that only these shows could give. So whereas you might think, oh, it's a bummer you don't get a movie, Scarlet Witch, but you get a show, it's almost like it's it takes these non-marquee characters and gives them a chance to become more marquee because suddenly we're going to be invested in them. And if they manage to actually keep the quality level up and there's characters dancing between the movies and the TV shows, and they can pull some like Mandalorian this last season proved to us that they aren't withholding big universe moments from this television stuff. I don't think Marvel's going to do that either. I think important stuff's going to happen in these shows. And I'm not saying, because it'll affect the next movie. I'm not so much talking about the sequential portion of it, but just the fact that giving these characters room to breathe and the kind of stories they can tell, I could see eventually thinking the shows are the really good part of this. There might be people that don't like the movies, but love the way the shows give you a different feel. There's an upcoming show, they haven't said when, but the Secret Invasion show, starring Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn. Whatever you want to think about Marvel, the fact that we're getting a sci-fi action adventure espionage show starring Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn, you know what I mean? Right. And it's like, okay, give me that. So the fact that crazy. They can do some really cool stuff with these characters that we've seen in the movies but not seen like big stories built around them, I think that creates a really new spot for these quote unquote secondary characters.
Yeah, I think what's really cool is Kevin Feige is a bastard. Let me tell you why. He takes properties that we know, even if you read a comic book, House of M, some of the references to Pleasantville and things like that. And he's like, that, but I'm going to do something totally different than you've seen before. And it changes it a little bit. So if you have some reference to it, it does help, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to know what's going to happen because they take the resources that they have within the world and then they kind of twist it up and make it, intermingle it in a way that is pretty crazy because I've read some of the Vision comics where he's in this utopia that he's in and House of M references and stuff like that. It's pretty cool what's happening. And one thing I do know is the references to Stark Industry and Sword and things like that made me so excited that I almost fainted. And that's what I think is a really cool thing. Obviously, this world that they're in is some sort of shell, some sort of utopia that's being built. Is she in it by force or whatever?
Did she create it?
Yeah. Did she create it?
She created it, yeah.
Who's there? It's being monitored. We do know that part about it. By whom? We see that it's a sword book or something like that. But what does that mean in terms of what's going to happen? And still, even with knowing that information, it doesn't mean that you can solve the mystery. And I think there's something so really cool about that. So. Yeah,
right. Even if you're the biggest comics nerd in the world, the Marvel movies have stifled your attempt to know what's about to happen. Even with like Infinity War and like names that are taken directly from comic book stories that are ostensibly telling that story, the details are so different. You're right. You can't lord it over people who didn't read the comics. You
can't.
Like, I hate that anyway, but you can't even do it.
I read one of my favorite comics of all time, favorite comic book series is Civil War. I read the side comics, I read the mains, and it's like close to 300 comics altogether. Mm-hmm. Read them all. None of the stuff that happened in that comic happened in the movies, and there's something really cool about that. It has the namesake, it has some ideas, but what's happening in the comic is not the same. And I like that Kevin Feige respects the properties and does have a cool spin on it. And this is very much proof of that. So
Did Ronald just say something nice about Kevin Feige?
He did, and we have it recorded for prosperity.
All right, let's just hold. We've even got video. Yeah, although his mouth is kind of concealed by his pop screen, so he could claim that he didn't really say that. We deep fake.
I don't think he could argue that.
No,
we can recreate that.
I wanted to ask you though, Ronald, and you kind of answered this question, but don't you? Even though I can, and again, I joke. I sort of get your eye rolling. I mean, it's kind of fun to see you exaggerate it, but like your feelings about Kevin Feige, I get them. Yeah. But don't you think that hearing him talk about the plan at this point is part of what gives you faith in the fact that they're going somewhere? Because this guy seems like he's not doing things half-cocked and he's not doing them. He seems to understand somehow where this franchise, this larger franchise, can go. And he always, thus far, he's produced a lot of individual movies that take you there emotionally too. So I feel like when he says, "Oh, I'm excited about where this is going," I kind of am like, I mean, I know he's a marketing guy and I know that it's just marketing, but there is a plan. And we've said this before, it behooves them to make good shit because their plan works better if we're on the hook. And right now,
absolutely,
they sort of have us on the Marvel hook. We were, what happened was they took Marvel away from us last year. we had to wait. We had to wait
We
for
were
new Marvel.
exhausted. Yeah,
And I even was relieved to not have Marvel to talk about.
Me
But
too.
now that they got me back on the drip, I'm like, yeah, just crank up the dose.
Let's
Give
go.
me
Yeah.
more. And I love the fact that we're basically straight through weekly now, almost until
Yes.
the next movie, if that comes out in theaters. And then we've got 4 movies this year. I don't know. The movies at this point feel like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with the theatrical landscape? But having
Yeah.
this stuff on Apple TV Plus, not Apple TV, having this stuff on Disney Plus, that's the hard part nowadays, is keeping the names of all the streaming services straight. But like, that's exciting. It's like, I'm excited when Mandalorian ended, and I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. We don't have this family appointment at the end of the week anymore. It's like, well, now here's our weekly, Marvel appointment, and we're all into it. So
Yeah,
definitely.
it's exciting. I mean, but one thing we have to keep mentioning over and over again is the chemistry between the two stars. This would not be able to work in a story that has primarily just them on the screen.
Not even doing
This show-
superhero stuff,
Right, not even doing superhero stuff. There's no way this could have worked without the chemistry that these two have. And I can tell you, it's like it's popping off the screen. It's so good, the chemistry that Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany have on screen. It is hypnotic, man. They're really good on screen together.
Yeah.
And I love old sitcoms, man. Like it just is a great show so far.
Well, do you think it's kind of interesting you catch yourself chuckling at little innocent sitcom jokes, like as it goes along? My whole family laughed when Catherine Hahn checked out the mailman's butt after he walked away. My whole family chuckled. I don't think we've collectively chuckled at something so innocent or so like simple. Yeah. I think that it's funny that like it's not making fun of the old sitcoms, even right down to like the editing techniques and the effects that they use. They sort of are using what those effects would have looked like on an old show. Yes. Made it in the time rather than marveling them up, So I think that like there's a lot of love going into that, the details of those parodies. And so I can't wait for the 80s and 90s stuff.
I know
if they get up to like single cam cringe comedy shows or something like that. That'll be so fun to see how they interpolate that. So anyway.
So those new episodes will be coming out every Friday, just like Mandalorian did. So
so we'll be releasing these like a week late every week.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll be recapping with you folks.
Yeah.
We'll give it some time to breathe. You can watch over it a couple of times, and we'll have some commentary on it. So,
yeah. Cool. So that's out on Disney Plus. Again, Servant season 2 is on Apple TV Plus, and we talked earlier about Wonder Woman 84, which will be on HBO Max for a few more days, I believe, after this podcast comes out. But Soul will be on Disney Plus also. So Disney Plus is a pretty good value these days, I think.
Absolutely.
So I think we're gonna probably wrap it up now. Are we good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, we're good. Man.
Okay, cool. So we'll check in next week. Hopefully we'll get back together. We'll talk about the 3rd episode of, I guess, Servant and WandaVision and whatever other movies we've seen between now and then. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to mention or throw out before we close out the episode?
One Night in Miami. See that movie as soon as humanly possible. It was incredible. That's
great. That's on Amazon Prime, right?
Yes, Amazon Prime. Included in the membership. No extra money.
Look at that. Included in the subscription. Look at that. You love to see it where you don't have to pay something separate.
You love to see it.
You love to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
You're right. I do. So you can find past episodes, movieschmovie.com, facebook.com/movieschmovie, and the podcast. If you subscribe to the feeds, it's pretty much on any podcast platform you could be subscribing to. If it's not, please let us know, and we'll try to get on there. But we should be pretty much everywhere at this point. If you happen to check out this episode on Facebook or somewhere where we can interact with you, definitely comment on the post. Let us know what you thought of Servant or WandaVision, Wonder Woman, so anything like that, or maybe something you saw between the last time we talked in this episode that you want us to make sure we've seen also. We'd appreciate the feedback, and always up for discussion. Love talking to anybody who takes the time to listen to us. So please do that if you have an opportunity. Also, if you have an opportunity, if you subscribe through iTunes, please leave a review or a star rating.
Please.
Only if it's a 5-star and only if it's extremely positive. Otherwise, don't listen to anything I just said. But yeah, man, it was good talking to you guys. I'm glad we got back together and kind of got it going again. And we'll get back together next week. And
okay.
All right, cool. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
Happy New Year.